Welcome to our More Than D&D characters. Today we have special guest Danny Denison with us, he, him pronouns, who will be talking about exploring aspects of yourself through making and playing characters in TTRPGs. As we say in the show, we believe that TTRPGs have an effect on the people who experience them on a deeper level, and therefore we are more than D&D characters. We, of course, are thrilled to have Danny here. Danny has been Kate and I's friend for such a long time and has been with us on this journey with Knocked Prone for a very, very long time. It's it's crazy to think of how far back you go with Knocked Prone specifically. It's been from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's been I can't even think. It's hard to think of when we weren't doing it.
Yeah.
Because I can't even put it in years. It was back
2019, if I remember right, I'm looking over at Cade. Near the end of 2019 is when we started the beginnings of Knocked Prone. And then in the very first campaign, you played in it. I think the first two before the trilogy series that's available to the public right now. So even before what's already out, you were a part of it before then. So, I mean, it's been 6 years of being involved with Knocked Prone. So you kind of are our OG person.
OG.
So I don't know. It's kind of fun. It's been
amazing. It's been really cool that you guys have been able to stick with and keep on top of the work for so long. Because I remember when we were first starting, I was I hope this doesn't end up burning them out. And then, you guys have to stop. But we just kept trucking along, going and going.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. But I mean, I always appreciate you just for how much you've stuck with us through so many different things, being at the very beginning and we were just, so new at everything, and then jumping into the trilogy series when we moved over to video, and even now being on this show, and being with us, you've just always been a huge support. So we appreciate you for that. Yes. But besides the nerdy things in your life, what else do you do? Introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh man. Okay. So my name's Danny. I work with adults with disabilities, so I'm currently the med driver. I drive everybody to their medical appointments, which is a really fun, chaotic job, which fits really well with my chaotic energy, I guess, to just constantly be running around doing various tasks and stuff. I love working with kids as well. I volunteer with a CASA program, the Court Appointed Special Advocate. I did a lot with the family place. Lots of babysitting, just an absolute blast. And recently been very involved in Cache Valley Mutual Aid, which is a little organization popping up here that's been super fun. They've been doing free community dinners, which I think is just the coolest thing to I feel a big thing missing in our area of the world in general is just really strong community ties that are more general.
Yeah.
Because there's some community things, but they're usually a little bit more niche and stuff like that. And so I don't know, free community dinners feels like an awesome direction for things to go in.
Yeah. Yeah. You say involved, and that's got to be top 3 words I would use to describe you. It's just involved. You're involved in so many things, and I feel you've always done so much, and that's amazing. And I'm excited about Cache Valley Mutual Aid as well. So I mean, it really is. Yeah. I do think that it's fulfilling a niche here that we don't have. So it's cool that you're a part of that.
It feels like it's rapidly expanding. We have a bunch of people who are ready and wanting to be volunteers. They're just trying to figure out how they can fit in the group as volunteers, and the funding hasn't quite caught up with the volunteers yet. Mm-hmm. And so it's been interesting as it's slow starting, but it feels, I don't know, like a really solid beginning, if that makes sense, just because we've had so many volunteers who've been continually engaged, not just coming and going. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's been very exciting.
Good. That's good. Well, you're getting me pumped up.
Yeah.
Kate and I should really be more involved and jump in and do it. So, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end of the show where you can find a lot of things that are connected to Danny, including things with Cache Valley Mutual Aid and a couple other things. So we will include that in the show notes and review that by the end of this episode. So yeah, but Danny is seriously such an insightful person. I was excited to have you on the show because I feel you are so good at just, I don't know, you're always so thoughtful about a wide variety of topics. And so having this style of show, I just feel is so perfect for you. And I'm really excited about your topic that you were wanting to talk about for this episode. So I know we're going to be touching on your process on how you make characters for D&D and how you put yourself into your characters, which not everybody does. I want to say everybody does it, but I don't know that everybody does it, especially intentionally. And I love that the way that you do it is with intention. So that's kind of what our topic will be about today. But then we'll kind of first jump into a little bit on your D&D backstory is what I like to call it. You know, how you got started with it, that kind of thing. And then we'll jump more into that topic. So you ready?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I want to know how you were very first introduced to TTRPGs.
Ooh, okay. First introduced, my older brother played some D&D with some of his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just like kind of wanted some more players / I don't know if we were hanging out before or something. So he took me and my younger brother as well to go play D&D. And the first experience, I just kind of thrown into it. Not a lot of time to prep or anything. Made a character named Dex. He was me because I didn't fully understand roleplay yet. Plus, I just wanted to figure out how to play the game.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, playing yourself in D&D, I was going to get into this a little later, but it really has a lot of cool things because like it's a fun world to explore, and like reacting to it how you genuinely would is fun to see how that plays out, how that affects the world. And so I really enjoyed it. And it also made just learning the mechanics easier without having to also figure out what's my character going to do.
For sure. But that is interesting that's how you kind of started D&D as well. Like that your introduction to it was playing yourself. Because like I said, not everybody starts out that way. And so I think that maybe kind of molded a little bit of what your D&D experience ended up being like.
I think a lot of it came from actually, I wanted to start role playing, but I had a hard time letting go of like playing myself, just because the D&D universe can be so cool and it's so fun to explore somebody's world. And so I want to respond to it the way I normally, I think I would.
Yeah.
But I did want to try role playing. So I kind of did a hybrid and then saw what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. Not that necessarily it's always bad, but you know, like there was some things that like, oh, well, I stuck too much to myself like this. So I didn't really experience that part of role play. So I kind of carved out the best of both worlds for myself.
Yeah. So this first time you played and it was with, you know, your character Dex, how old were you at that point?
Oh, I have no idea. Probably like somewhere between 10 and 14.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So
I was thinking
young.
It was kind of later than that. So no, that's way cool. So where did that kind of go after that?
You know, it kind of like a lot of D&D campaigns, it kind of fizzled out a little bit. We did have a little bit of a jump back where we had we played like 2 sessions and then we couldn't like schedule with his friend, and my brother kind of took over DMing for me and my younger brother. So we played a little bit more of that out, and then it just kind of fizzled out after that. Okay.
So I'm also interested because I don't play D&D with my family. Okay, well, actually, I've just started playing with my in-laws recently, but especially at the beginning of D&D, like it was a completely friend-based thing. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on especially learning about D&D and getting your first experiences through playing largely with family.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting to think about. I would say it probably, like, just because me and my brothers have a very, like, I don't know, friendship type relationship, it probably wasn't all that different for me than just starting out playing with friends.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. Cause that wouldn't, I mean, not that I'm not friends with my siblings. I absolutely am, but I just feel like that would have been so different for me compared to what I ended up doing.
It definitely would have been very different if I was playing with like my sisters or my parents.
Yeah.
Like just cause, just exploring the world with them would be very different than just like my brothers, where we just have like a very, I don't know, a very specific relationship, I would say.
Well, and I feel like brothers, I don't know, I feel like you and your brothers are very much kind of like on the same wavelength with a lot of things, you know? So like hanging out like friends, I mean, that makes sense to me. So, okay, very good. You kind of told me a little bit about your first D&D character that you played. And so I'm curious, when you started playing after that, at that point, was it deliberate that you were playing parts of yourself, or is that something that kind of came later?
The first few, it was like a little bit, like I had a couple characters in between. I can't really remember them that much. Like after Dex, with my brothers, I had like one other character, and then like I had another character pop up in like a 3-game campaign with some people I was working with at Walmart. I can't remember all that much about them. I think I tried to make them more role play, but I didn't like, it was hard for me to feel that connection with them.
Mhm.
Probably a lot of it was just I didn't put enough time to really make the character fully fledged, but I kept feeling that pull of wanting to have that deeper connection with the character and play it as myself. And so those ones just kind of gravitated towards playing myself as well.
Yeah.
The first one I really kind of succeeded with was actually with Knocked Prone season 0, where I played Reckle. That was like one of the first times I played like a character different than me.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about Reckle and how he was just what things set you apart from him.
I think I'm a lot more, and it might not show at the moment, but like I'm usually typically more reserved, particularly with like new people until we like have that connection. And then I get very like out and about and I don't know. But with Reckle, I really want him to be like a very flashy, I'm playing a bard. First time playing a bard. Got to live that bard lifestyle. Very performative. And so I really enjoyed a lot of that. And then as I was trying to play him and feel more connected to him, that's when I started to like, I almost started like carving out like what parts of him could be me. And then also I wanted to inject some like totally different things. And so Reckle was like really a lot like an experiment of a character. I remember playing with a lot of different ideas. That was the first time I did like trying to rhyme only at times.
Yes.
Which has been kind of a theme throughout my D&D career, if you will.
You're so good at it. It's incredible. So, and I'm sure that took practice, to get there. So
lots of writing.
Yeah. Very cool.
I would literally sit there with like a pen and paper and write like furiously to try to get rhymes ready for the next time I needed to speak. It honestly makes D&D a little stressful, but like in a fun way. Like, like okay, got to get like some good bars for the next encounter.
Yeah. But it keeps you engaged, like you can't like just chill when you have a character like that. So it's kind of interesting. All right. Well, it's interesting to think of. I honestly haven't heard a lot of that. Like I said, I don't think I realized that you started playing D&D so young. And so that's really cool.
There was like a massive break in between those. So like when we started Knocked Prone, that's probably why you don't associate me as playing so young. One, that was like kind of half D&D because my brother was still just teaching me.
Yeah.
And then that really short campaign wasn't enough to really learn. So Knocked Prone was the first time I really like started figuring out D&D.
Totally. Now that you say that, I think that was probably part of my thought process there is that you had taken a big break there. So kind of fun to come back and then be a part of the Knocked Prone family like heavily and everything. So but I know like we've talked about how for now, like Knocked Prone real play is like kind of, it's on a hiatus for now. We really like don't know what the timeline's going to be like and what it's going to look like next. Like we've always said that we're going to take a break, and this time actually having this show, I feel like is letting us help ourselves like actually take a break.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling knowing that like, I don't know, like we just wrapped up campaign 3 and
I'm kind of in like an interesting spot, and I feel like this has been my life with everything always, but like I'm excited for Mason's campaign. And so like there's a huge part of me that's just like, let's get going. But then there's also the part of me that's so busy doing so many things like, well, if it took another 2 weeks, that's okay. And then so I'm very much of two minds about it. But in the end, especially right now where my friend group is on a break from D&D, we played a ton. We're kind of on a board game kick right now. And so I have that like extra itch pulling me like ready to start a campaign just because I don't have one going right now. And it's like, what?
Okay, I was going to ask you that if you're playing any D&D right now, or like right now you're not a part of any games.
Not right now.
That's crazy.
I am running a mini campaign for some of the kids I babysit.
Oh, fun.
Which has been very cute. I wish I had pulled up the picture. One of them refused to play the whole time, and they drew like the entire like day out of like events that happened.
Wow.
They just tried to draw like everything that happened on like little squares, like almost like a comic strip.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it was very cute. I don't know if that'll keep going though. There's a lot of other high energy activities I think they prefer. But
yeah.
every once in a while, it might be a good option to pull back out.
That's fun. Well, there's like your little D&D supplement.
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
like something
just
going on there. But I get
hold it
that.
up.
Like, it's funny. Cade will have times where he's playing like 3-4 games at once. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, maybe this is a bit much. But if it ever hits a point where it lulls and there's not really anything going on, there's always that little itch to be like, I'm not a part of a game right now.
Yeah, I don't think I've not been part of a campaign. This could be wrong, but for probably the full 5 years. Because I think we went from Knock Prone and then we had our friend campaign with Mason for a really long time. And then we had Knock Prone going after that. And now
You've
that's
always
ended.
had kind of one
in
of those.
between that, I had a bunch of off and ons with my other friend groups, which were pretty solid campaigns. Like we've played so much that I've like exhausted one of my worlds that I've made. Like I can't DM another one in it because I was like, we did one area and then we did another area of the world and then we did like an alternate timeline and then there's like a hidden part of the universe I started them in so they could experience that, which had a lot to explore in itself. And now I'm like, I can't run another one in here.
It's
like
done.
that is, at least for that group, like it is exhausted.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you have to know when to be like, and scene. That world is done, you know? That's wild. I mean, that tells you how much D&D you've played though, in order to really feel like you've exhausted a whole world.
Yeah. And so it is just very interesting going from at least I've had 3, 2, and at least 1 campaign going to just like none. It's like, well,
yeah. Whew. Big difference. Okay, well, let's jump into our topic a little bit more. I want to start with what your process is for making a character. What does that look like?
So there's usually 2 like main aspects of it. We alluded to it a little bit earlier. The first one is picking like 1 or 2 important things to me or parts of myself or things I want to experience. Maybe they don't necessarily have to be a part of me, but just things I want to like, I don't know, experience more of or put myself in that mindset. And I inject those into the character and really like expand that part of them. So that's like a major part. And then because I struggle a little bit more with combat in D&D, I'm a very roleplay heavy player. So in combat, I like to have something, I like to inject something really special about their play style in combat to give them something I look forward to in combat, a way to highlight and shine that like specific way they do things.
I love that.
And so that's like the 2 things I will do with a character before I get going on anything else. Like those have to be there for me to feel connected. Okay, so you start with
those things.
Yes. Sometimes like I get a little bit of a character idea and then I like inject them, but that's really where everything comes from in the end is like, I'll get a little bit of an idea and then I build everything around those 2.
So then when you're making decisions about other things, whether it's like their stats or trait spawns and flaws, like all that kind of stuff, you're kind of like looking back to that little like thesis statement almost.
Absolutely. And when I'm leveling up, I'm always thinking about how can I like improve on this like niche part of them, like what level would they take because of those like role play aspects and what would they build to help them actually fulfill that like combat role they want to play. Yeah. Okay, cool. But I love that it seems like one of the driving factors in creating characters this way is the fact that it gives you motivation for building that character and being connected with them and being excited for combat, even though it isn't your favorite part of D&D. Like, I like how that propels so many things. Yeah, I really, really recommend it. Like as an example, I'm going to talk a lot about Tess. Obviously, that's like been the like character I always look to the most. The one I think I succeeded the most in like making it fit that niche. So like for him, it was, I wanted a lot of it to be like his self-worth and anxiety, like specifically social anxiety. So like really amplified those in him like a lot. And then in combat, kind of revolving around that, I made him a pacifist where he refused to do damage. He would help his friends fight because he didn't want his friends to lose a fight, but he wouldn't do the damage himself because he had so much like self-worth issues around that. Like doesn't want to see himself as someone who would harm something else. Yeah. And so, it just made combat really fun. And I did design him specifically so it wasn't like terrible for the team to just be like, okay, we're down a person all the time. So I really had to like sit down and make a build. Like, how can I make him a useful part of the team while not doing damage. And then it made every combat very interesting for me trying to figure out how I can do that effectively.
Yes. And it was interesting to listen to. It was. I realize now because I know that we're going to have some people listening that have listened to our show and haven't listened to our show. So Tess is a part of campaign 1 of the Knocked From Real Play podcast. And so in the trilogy series, it's right there at the beginning. And Tess really was a beautifully built character. And it was really, even though like, I don't know, I think some people have this stereotype of like pacifist D&D characters equals boring to some people, but it's like, no, it was so far from that. But I think that it was really clear to see as an audience member, like, I don't think I knew at the time or that even the audience would really put together that you were putting in pieces of yourself, but you could just tell that like you were so invested in that character and that there were deeper things going on than just like basic character role play, you know? Yeah. So I thought that was fantastic. So I know we're going to keep talking about Tess, which I love. I like that he's the motif we can kind of like refer back to because like he's had that effect on you and everything. I also, go ahead.
Yeah. Just like to wrap that up in a nice little bow. Tess, I will say, is the one who like really convinced me like this is how I want to play D&D and make all my characters. And so like, even though I was kind of doing it before, it wasn't like something I considered like my style of making characters until Tess, where I'm like, this is it.
Okay. Like, so it was in the experience of playing that though, that you're like, something about this is working. Something about this is right. Yeah. So that's great. And then of course you've had characters since then too. So when we talked about this topic, you know, pre-recording and we were like discussing it and everything, you had basically like a whole list of characters that you've played and kind of traits that you've put into them. So, I mean, really, this is up to you because I didn't give you a heads up for this, but I would love to know if you could like list some of the characters you've played and then what traits you put into them. It's okay if it's not perfect or if you can't remember everything.
I'd have to pull up the list to do it all because my brain's so chaotic, but I think I could do quite a few.
Yeah.
So like Tandon, which again, this was before I had like totally cemented it, but I was already kind of doing it. For him.
And Tandon is home game with Mason.
Yes, home game with Mason. And basically, I wasn't ready to let go of Reckle when we had finished our campaign. So I just took Reckle and put him in the home game with Mason. With a little bit of tweak to make him fit the new campaign. And so what I really wanted to do out of that is just be super performative. Because I think there's a large part of me. I mean, like obviously I've been part of Knock Prone. So like it's a little apparent I have some like desire to be performative. But like I'm typically like really just... I don't know. I try to just be really upfront with everything in life. And I'm not like super over the top about a lot of things. I'm just very straightforward about like, and so I wanted to play a little bit more with being really over the top and performative. So I designed him around that, which is why I made him only rhyme like as much as possible. Like, especially when he's saying something important, like it needed to be in a rhyme in like a sing-song fashion. And then I wanted his combat to be extremely flashy. So I did a lot of lightning to like make it flashy. And vicious mockery, I wanted to pour it in like that he like rhymes all the time and is so performative. So his main combat tool, which luckily Mason as a DM, amazing, helped work with empowering vicious mockery. So I could keep using it because that was my main attack because I wanted to diss people as like my combat. I wanted to just come up with like really, really good rhyming disses. Yeah. So that's how that kind of played out with him. And I think that like is what kind of set up what I want out of a character for Tess, which then, like I said, is kind of social anxiety and self-worth, self-image, with pacifist being that how it manifested. And then obviously if you watch the podcast, he also has like a snap in combat that's very foundational to how he plays. And then I went into Yui, which Yui's like one of the first characters I like knew I was doing it right. Cause like Tess, I built it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I'm going to make every character. So Yui, I went in with that specific idea. And with him, this is kind of it's a little darker. Be ready. But like, obviously we all have like those things we struggle with and those tough emotions. He's kind of designed off of like a younger kid from Tokyo Ghoul, where it's just like all of the worst things have happened, like all the traumas, the worst things. And like, I definitely I'm somebody who struggles a little bit with like the macro things going on in the world and like some of the hardship I see around me. So I kind of put all that in a character to just be like totally emotionally overwhelmed. And just kind of living in that experience of just not being able to cope with it.
Yeah.
And so I designed his combat to just be extremely reckless. And the way he like stayed as part of the team is the one thing that he was holding on to. Like I wanted to just he just wanted to be part of a team and be an important part of the team.
Yeah.
And that was like all he cared about.
Yeah.
So everything he did in combat was with like no regards for his safety. I worked on Cade to like with Cade. We came up with a little bit of a homebrew where his crit fails were worse, but his crit succeeds were better. Yeah. To kind of amplify that in him. So that was a really fun one. And then
sorry. So before we move on from Yui too, I think I remember us kind of chatting a little bit about Yui before this and just how Yui was challenging because that was still in season 1 when Tess was just I don't want to give away any spoilers. Tess was suddenly out of the picture for just, preoccupied. Kate says preoccupied. Tess is preoccupied. And so that's what led you to playing Yui. But I don't remember how many sessions it was for, but it was relatively little. And at that point, how many players did we have in that game? Because we had Jameson playing Jack as well. We had 5 players at that point. Is that right?
I think so.
So the table was pretty full and we were deep into the storyline. A lot was going on. And so I believe I remember you saying that like there wasn't a full chance for Yui to be able to explore that character fully, right?
Yeah. Definitely didn't get to finish that.
Yeah. And I mean, like there were situational things that kind of made that the case and that happens, right, in D&D. But kind of a bummer though to hear like that maybe there was a potential there that wasn't fully reached, or there were character development moments that really weren't hit because of the time and like stage time that you had. Yeah,
just because of the amount of time, it really had to be more like a window in that character. So what I really focused on was just trying to show the trajectory he was going in. So like when he was left off, hopefully people would be left thinking about what he's going to do, how he's going to do it.
Yeah.
Sure. That would have definitely been an interesting one. I definitely want to dive back into a Yui type character again at some point. But we'll see.
When you're emotionally ready for it, right? Where you're like, let's get back into that headspace and role play there, right?
It's also a tricky one to play with like a character who's just like they had no health. You're playing them recklessly to like fit that feeling and like commit to the character. So it's like, even if I do dive back in them, will they survive long enough to like have that realized?
Yes. I do wonder too. I want you to continue on with your list because I'm enjoying hearing about multiple characters. But thinking about Yui, I don't know. I just think of like getting into a character where it is like a little bit heavier. It is a part of you that like has that like kind of mental weight to it. Yeah. But then knowing that you might, and even playing a character isn't even necessarily about finding some kind of resolution or solution or like fixing any one particular thing too. So I'm kind of just curious like how you end up walking away from playing a character like that and like feel good about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is very interesting. And it's kind of the same like with like Tess, because like his like I definitely really amplified the social anxiety playing like, and it was kind of intense to like play where it kind of weighed a little bit on you, and Yui obviously being the same. Yeah. I think a lot of my goal, I didn't really set out to necessarily have a resolution, but just to like allow myself to sit with those emotions, how they feel. And a lot of it is just understanding and a little bit of like hoping that will lead to like acceptance of those thoughts and feelings. Maybe they're a little less scary when they come up naturally in our like real play lives.
Yeah. Yes. No, I'm so interested in that thought, because I do think that, you're not the first person to put parts of themselves, especially like harder or scarier or whatever, like parts of yourself into a character. But sometimes I wonder if people's experience with that is that it really ends up like causing them more heartache, or like really like ramping up in them, or just creating more anxiousness around that. I don't know. So it makes me think of, okay, well, what is the goal? Especially when I don't think it's realistic to say like, oh yes, I'm doing this so that I can fix this part of myself, and it'll never be a problem again. Especially if the character is based around something like the bigger problems of the world, and the weight of that.
I'm just going to fix it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to play this D&D game and everything will be fine. No, like, and so I like that idea that it might just be about, facing that, letting it be there, so maybe it's less scary, or just accepting that part of yourself. So okay, very good. All right, I don't want to interrupt your list. Keep it going.
Good. And then that leads to Zell, which kind of also reminds me of a part of Yui before I go into that. So I've kind of mentioned this before. I don't know if, probably not in this podcast, but like my big goal I've been working up in life is to like be fostering. So like I've thought a lot about like kids struggling and stuff like that. So I think that part of like trying to experience that thought and put myself in that mindset is kind of part of why I did design Yui, is because like thinking about fostering kids who've possibly been through a lot of intense stuff, to kind of sit with like the emotions and how it would feel to just be totally emotionally overwhelmed and unable to process the world would help with that. And then with that grounding, I'll kind of build up to Zell here, where Zell I designed because I've wanted to foster, but it hasn't been quite possible yet. So I just put fatherhood was like Zell's big thing. I just wanted to really focus his entire life revolving around fatherhood and trying to be a father. And then another aspect I amplified in him was failure, because I think those are two aspects. One, I really wanted to explore the feelings of being a father more. And then two, like failure can be scary. And we're kind of at that point in life that like things are getting there. Like decisions are all like leading to building like the future we want to live in. And so I don't know, with like that fear of failure or like it not turning out exactly how I wanted to include a little bit of that in him and how he dealt with those things. And then the way that manifested in combat was he was like focused entirely on protecting others. In some combats that was easier than others, but Cade actually special designed a character a class that just fit it so well. And so I decided to play that, even though I think you made that before. I don't actually know. Yeah.
It's based on the Purple Dragon Knight.
Okay, so based on the Purple Dragon Knight, but I know you kind of buffed it, added some things to it. Kind of reflavored it as well. Like I don't feel like it was the exact same, but to build off of that.
Kind of a charisma fighter-esque thing. And so it just fits so good. So I decided to play that, and it was fantastic to just play. I also took like the intercept feat with Battle Master, stuff like that. So whenever somebody was attacked, I could try to take that damage for them. And it worked out perfectly in the end combat, I will say. Like that was like the dream combat for Zell to have, to be able to just really utilize. Yeah.
Well, it's actually really fun to hear you compare Zell and Yui, because I don't at all see them as being the same. And they are actually quite unique from each other for sure. But I can see the tie there.
Yeah, they're almost total opposites. Because Zell, and it ended up being the way in the campaign, like he ends up picking up like a little character named Chap along the way, who's like a character who's kind of lived through a lot of that devastation and definitely is disconnected from like a lot of the traumas and things that have happened in his life. And so it worked out pretty well. It was very fun.
Yeah. Do you ever find it scary to put little vulnerable pieces in your character, because like I said, I don't know that a lot of the people you've played with necessarily know that that's exactly what you're doing, but then you're still interacting with them, whether it's an NPC or it's the BBG or just other, players at the table. I don't know if you feel like you personalize that sometimes and feel like, I don't know, or maybe you don't, and that's fine, but is that hard sometimes?
It was definitely harder early on, especially when I totally didn't understand like how much some people role played, like where there was no parts of them in like their decision making, or even if they were intentionally making decisions that were like not something that they would make. So I remember my first campaign with that little Walmart group, I was actually pretty embarrassed after thinking about it, because I remember getting pretty frustrated at some of the decisions people were making, and their characters were like directly contradicting like my ideas and thoughts. And I remember being pretty frustrated and kind of taking that personally, like they weren't agreeing with me and they were making bad decisions that were going to like ruin the campaign. And like in hindsight, I realized they were just playing the character they had designed. They're actually probably really good role players in hindsight. And I just couldn't see that, and probably internalized it more than expressed it. So they couldn't like clarify that difference to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely an issue. And there has been like little moments like where I'll like do something that like is definitely more me than my character, or like, that part of me in that character, and something I actually like, kind of like want to do or like believed in, and then like head players back, nah, like that's dumb.
Yeah.
And you kind of got to roll with it a little bit.
Yes.
Understand they don't know that's you.
Right.
And like, people can just like genuinely disagree about how to approach things. And so, especially when they don't know that's part of you.
Yes.
And they're also role playing at the same time. So there's a lot of things going on. So you definitely have to have that little bit of extra layer of thick skin and just try to not internalize things too much, realize there's a lot of variables.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's so many variables. And I think the more you kind of break those apart, I think the more you can give yourself and other people a lot of grace for how things actually end up like playing out. But you also, I feel like you kind of have to do, if you're going to put yourself in your characters, you have to think through that process probably every so often, and just remember there's a lot of variables going on, like, and D&D is very much something that like you can't have a huge sense of control over anyway.
Yeah, you
like
really can't.
You can control your character, but also there's even aspects of your character that you can't control as well.
Yeah.
So
because like you mentioned that, like my character's definitely warped like into different things than I had anticipated at times. Like going back to Tess, he was supposed to be very socially anxious and not really push back on the team or make any decisions. But the team ended up being so antithetical to like his self-image part of him that is also really big that he ended up being forced to like kind of push the team in different directions and stuff, which was kind of a cool experience because it also ended up amplifying the social anxiety part of like him having to like find very careful ways to confront things.
Yes, so true.
And so I remember just like, and luckily I was really good at role playing at this point, so I was able to separate it, but actually feeling like pretty anxious. And like
we made it really hard on you. I'm not gonna lie.
And I think that's like part of like how well that hit, where I was like really feeling the emotion was like, I just love that play style and having that part of me feeling that connection. But
I remember having a couple of conversations out of game, especially out of recording as well, since we were in like podcast mode. But after the sessions, I remember me and Mason, because we were always causing problems with our characters, we were constantly like, hey, you are welcome to say no. You're welcome to push back. You're welcome to punish us for our bad decisions. And honestly, you probably had that conversation way too late as well. Cause I was like, yeah, that's a given, because we were making sketchy decisions.
What if I beat Tess within an inch of his life so that he confronts me?
I do.
Okay. Yes. So I don't know if you guys can hear Kate or not, but Kate says go ahead.
So I should explain. I kind of alluded to it, but I didn't talk about it before. So Tess's thing in combat is he won't do damage, but he's a druid. So if things got bad enough and he really needed to do damage, he would shapeshift into a wolf and just be ferocious and attack
Yes.
everything. And it helped a lot at those moments, but I was really like, I'm not going to use it unless like we really need to. And Tess has like a mental break basically.
Yes.
And he would use that to kind of dissociate from the harm he had to cause.
Mhm.
So with that in mind and how sometimes the team wanted me to do damage.
Yeah. Well, and now I'm trying to remember too if that was 100% because we were concerned about an upcoming combat. And so it was just like, well, maybe this is just what we have to do in order to feel like it was balanced. Or I don't know if it was also kind of more of a character development moment of like, well, maybe he needs this, maybe this will help fix some of the problems he's dealing with.
And I think with Mason's kind of evil character vibes, I think a lot of it was for him to figure out how he could control Tess.
Yeah.
If I'm right. So like not necessarily that it was needed for combat, but it was a little extra cherry on top and not necessarily for my character development, while that could also be nice, but mostly so he could just figure out how to control Tess.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually I know we'll have Mason on the show as well. So maybe we'll ask him a little bit about I'm actually really curious. Maybe it's just been so long since we've had that first campaign.
Have that thought to just get Tess's HP down to like 1 health, make him shapeshift.
Yeah. And I'm also just, again, because on the character creation side of things and the way that you role play and the decisions you make, like it's personalized to different people. So, like I'm curious what his motivating factors were in that. But okay. So my next question is like, and you can get specific with specific characters, or you could kind of answer this more broadly, like as a whole, but I want to know like, what things have you learned or processed or accepted about yourself through your D&D experiences so far?
Okay. I'll start with like a couple of the lighter ones and then jump into Tess, as well as Zell a little bit. I think that's one where it ended up landing a little harder. But with Tandon, I do think it really did convince me that I wanted to live like a little more performative at some points, even at the cost of some authenticity. I think there is some value in just like making things a little bit more exciting and being a little over the top. And even like, this is going to sound bad, like lying, but like, like really playing that out, not feeling the need to like clarify, like, oh, I'm just being silly. Like, I think there is some value in just kind of just being a little like flashy and having fun. And so I think I've tried to incorporate that more in my life just because I don't know, I'm definitely like a little bit of a victim of like, just, I get serious. I want to talk about serious things. And sometimes that fun kind of like falls to the side. With Yui, like you said, we didn't explore it fully. I do think it was good to be able to sit in that like feeling and thoughts for a while. Zell, I do think, I don't know if I really necessarily learned like a definitive thing I would want to change, but it was interesting to grapple between one of his big things he struggled with was whether to like mask his failure or like be very open about it, especially with oh man, am I not gonna remember Delry? Yeah. His like kid that was everything in his world. Like, did he want to let Delry see that failure in him? And so that was a very interesting experience to see like what is the value of like sharing your failures, but also not like, I don't know, needlessly like giving your kid trauma, and like exposing some of the worst parts of the world unnecessarily. And I do think it did get me leaning a little bit more to being a little more like honest and like raw with like someone you're caring for. And then Tess is probably the one I learned like the most concrete thing. So with the social anxiety part, where he was just constantly terrified of what the team thought of him, what the world thought of him. And he was very harsh on himself, like very, very judgmental about like how he was doing things. Didn't want to think of himself as someone who would harm something. One of the most concrete things I came out of that with was just realizing, like, as I was playing Tess in a way that he would be proud of himself, that social anxiety part was like harder to manifest, even like unnaturally, like trying to just draw it out as something he has. Because like I realized like, no, like he actually feels good about this now. Just like when you're living your life in a way you can feel good about, it really helps with like that social anxiety aspect, because it's like hard to like worry about what people are thinking of you if you're really proud of what you've done. You know, it just matters so much less. Obviously, that's easier said than done, but kind of gave me a roadmap for how to deal with my own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting for you to say like easier said than done. It's totally true. But I do think that that's one of the tools that D&D can kind of provide for that, is that it does give you an opportunity to play things out, even if it's like, okay, now I'm seeing that this is not very helpful or not very functional, or if it's a turning point in your character where all of a sudden you're role playing, like improving, which might even stretch yourself a little bit, like just depending on who you are and kind of like what that experience is like for you. So, it's just cool, the kind of opportunity that D&D can give you to do those things, because like, how were you supposed to accomplish that? I mean, there are other ways to handle those challenges. Yes. But like, without having that character and that experience with D&D, you would have had to have done it some other way. It wasn't going to happen on its own, I guess is what I'm saying,
Yeah. It kind of gives you a chance to live like a sped up life, right? Like I think of specifically like not experiences you can have on your own very much. Like since we're not at the point of fostering, it's not like I'm a primary caregiver for any kids, right? So like, that's just not like a real experience I can have right now. So being able to play that as Zell was important. And, obviously it's pretend, but it still really helps you play through the scenario, learn about how you might handle those. When Cade playing my child like reacts in a certain way, it's like, okay, well, like now I have to think on my feet, like how I would do that as a father.
Yeah.
And especially because I am the father role play part was like a big part of how I would want to do it. While I usually try to also inject some like, negative attributes into a character that I also want to honor. Cause I think every character should have some like negative aspects that you're grappling with that they
weaknesses.
Have to deal with.
They gotta have weaknesses.
Yeah, they gotta have weaknesses. So like not always completely how I would deal with it. But yeah, it's just interesting to play through those scenarios and think about how they work out.
Yeah. Yeah. You still got that experience. Okay. Very cool. So I'm curious, because I know that you've introduced D&D to people, and helped been a part of their process and like understanding a little more about D&D. So have you told, I'm just wondering, when you have a new person that's just getting started with D&D, do you explain this character creation process to them?
So it depends on how much time I have. Usually I'm just barely trying to get across the mechanics with somebody really new. Just giving them the bare starting bones of like how to play. I actually would encourage most new players to just play as themselves if they feel comfortable doing so that they can focus on learning the game and exploring the world without having to worry about what would my character do. Like, I don't know. I think it's just easier to just focus on how you would explore the world and learn how to actually do that. But once somebody does start role playing, I introduce like a simplified version of it rather than going into the specifics of you need a really niche combat thing and one like really big like part of yourself in that character or emotion that you're exploring with that character. I'll usually just focus on saying like you should always have a guiding star motivation. Is kind of a way to like imply all that simply.
Yes.
So like whatever you're doing, there should be like one guiding star thing you're always like working towards that isn't just like a specific thing you're doing, but why as well. Like you want to know your character, why they're really invested in this, how it makes them feel, and what they're like working towards. Yeah. And then I think a lot of the time that can end up getting people to the same place. Where if I did have more time though, I would want to specify like having that specific emotion to sit in. Cause when you do have like a specific like emotion that you're exploring with a character or like thing that they're dealing with, it does help root you in that character in a way that I think is often missing from people trying to role play without a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Because it's just hard to like really jump into the mindset of your character. But when you have those really strong pulls, it's easy to like, okay, because of this, I'm feeling this. And how does that affect everything else? I don't know. It just snaps you into character really quickly.
I do. I love your technique. You know, even though it's not something that like you need to do for D&D, I think there are totally benefits to the specific things that you do for that character creation. But I also like having the option to simplify that down to having that like North Star guidance as well.
Yeah.
Because I do think that gives plenty of space for people to do it their own way, while also like it's an important part of D&D whether or not you're putting yourself in your character or not. Even if you're going to play somebody that you absolutely aren't and you're not interested in that, like that's just still valuable anyways. And can help with it could have some of the same benefits as far as making the game more enjoyable and helping build your character and helping with role play moments. So I kind of like that there's a variety of how you could use kind of what has made TTRPGs so good for you. So I think that's great. I think the other thought that I had with the way that you play your characters is that to me, I think I'm always impressed with how well you do perform your characters. Like that's 100% the word that comes to my mind. And just the way that you can like commit to the bit, you know? And to me, like if I am going to put part of myself in my characters, I would hope that would help me role play better and really be committed to that character. But then there is to me that sense of like vulnerability as well, that I'm like, I'm putting myself out there and not just some made up character that I've, created. So I'm also just curious how you're able to commit to role play at the table.
Yeah. So like one of them is just obviously being blessed with like a really good D&D group that I've just always felt very comfortable with. When you know everybody, it's a little easier to put yourself out there a little bit and feel safe. I could definitely see if you're playing with like a new group or people you didn't know very well, you might want to mask that like a little more. You won't be able to put yourself in that character as fully, depending on your comfortability as well. But yeah, I could see it being tricky. But it's hard because I really like playing the character that way so much. My advice wants to be like, just do it anyways. It might be scary, but it's so worth it to just feel like part of that character. And obviously that might not be the right decision for everybody. You can kind of gauge who you're playing with, how you feel, your comfortability, and decide based on that. But I do encourage you to maybe push it just a little bit to that uncomfortable level. Just especially if it's making you a little uncomfortable, it probably means you're really resonating with that character, that you're really feeling that part of them and embodying it.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about some of the drawbacks, like potential cons that can kind of like come from doing this kind of thing. But I still feel like the overarching message, though, is that it's like, and it's still worth it. It's like, yep, like people could respond really poorly, or it might be a little hard on you, or your character might not play out how you envisioned in the first place, or you might not accomplish what you kind of set out to do with that character. And yet you just do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a good goal. Well, not always achievable. Like we all have our limits, but it can be really worth it.
Yeah. I think another thing for me too, in hearing you talk about all this, to me, it instills like this greater sense of responsibility for respecting other people's characters, because you never know if people are putting an aspect of themselves into their characters, either very directly, like we've talked about with you, or indirectly, right? Like some people might think that their character is completely just this made up thing. And then when you play it, you realize you do connect with parts of that, right? So not that that's the case for, absolutely everyone, but it does just kind of make you think like, just to be a little bit more conscious of that and how that could, maybe impact your role playing and also the relationship that you have with other players at the table a little bit more positively. So
it's definitely good advice.
For sure. Okay, so I think that's all I have today. I'm really curious if you, especially knowing like you're not playing a lot of D&D right now, do you always kind of have like a little list in the back of your head of like what parts of yourself you might put into a future character?
A little bit. Yeah, I do usually have some brewing. I like I said, I do want to re-explore Yui That is
Mhm.
like the most uncompleted character
Yeah.
I've played. I have had this like character on the background that is like very evil. So it's
Mhm.
interesting. It's just like their like focus is just like entirely on being strategic,
Mm-hmm.
and like all they care about is like showing how, or not necessarily even showing others, but just even to themselves, like how smart they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought that would be an interesting experience, and pushing myself to play an evil character,
Yeah.
which I've never really done. Like Yui's the closest thing I got to where they were just so disconnected. They didn't really have the time to process any moral
Yeah.
aspects in their decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be a really interesting one to try to inject like myself into an evil character.
Mm-hmm. That would be really
little bit.
cool and so unique, like so different.
Maybe it would be, I guess I could probably explain it more succinctly as just pride,
Mm-hmm.
just being super revolved around their own pride. And the way that's going to manifest is by playing like a wizard with a bunch of macro spells.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to like dominate like the environment.
Yeah. Cool. I would
That'll
love
be
that. Okay, very, very good.
Speaking of evil characters, last thing I want to add about like when you do put yourself into a character and stuff is like sometimes it's going to be hard to play that character with the direction the campaign is going. I think it can be great to like have part of that being that like sometimes your character won't be able to do what they care about.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause like a lot of internal conflict.
Yeah.
Like I think some people like once their character can't be played the way they like think it should be, they like start immediately thinking they should switch characters, which isn't necessarily the wrong idea sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is good to switch characters if it's not resonating with you or for whatever reason you want to try a different style. But I think it can also be really cool to have a character like really struggling with
Yeah.
like not feeling invested, have an emotional breakdown, let them gain some new maladaptive behaviors. They start
Mhm.
like acting poorly, getting doing drugs, stuff like that to try to cope
Yeah.
with like that sense of loss that they can't work towards their main objective.
Yeah.
And then you can come out of that either changing that main objective and like that like part of them, or figuring out how it can fit in the
Mhm.
campaign again.
Mm-hmm. I like how that also, it pushes you as a player specifically too. It's not just about like, well, my character struggling. What you're describing to me sounds like, no, I'm struggling with my character not being how I intended for my character to be, right? And so it's like, well, yes, you could switch it up. You could get a new character. You could, just be like, hey, retcon, I'm doing this instead. You could do those things. But I also think it's fun to allow yourself the idea of pushing through that and saying like, okay, but like, where can we go from here? Because that's also just life, isn't it? Even when we're talking about like our own like personal development, it's like, well, yeah, you get things thrown at you that you're like, well, this isn't how I wanted it or intended it. And so to kind of like go with it from there is actually kind of a cool human skill. Anyway.
Yeah. My favorite parts of playing Tandon were actually right after our biggest failures in the campaign and just dealing with like that like destructed sense of self and like failing his performances and stuff like that. It just like having that like mental breakdown and role playing that out can be so fun.
Yeah. Super. We love it. We love a good character mental breakdown. Okay, awesome. All right. So like I said, you can find everywhere that Danny can be found on the internet that he wants to be found will be in our show notes. So I believe we'll have your Facebook page and your YouTube channel because you've got some really amazing music and as well as a link to Cache Valley Mutual Aid if you happen to be in the North Logan area and want to be connected to them here locally. And all of that can be found there. And if you want to hear more of Danny and now all the characters that he's talking about, you can listen to Campaign 1 and Campaign 3 of the Nocturne podcast to hear his characters. And we hope you remember when life knocks you flat on your back, all you got to do is keep rolling. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.